Ms. Hayden is going to come forward, and we're going to have presentation, discussion, possible action regarding a presentation and update on the Mabel Claire Thomas Park redevelopment project. This is a workshop item, and I do have one person signed up to speak. After the presentation, council can ask questions, and then we'll hear from the individual who wishes to speak. Ms. Hayden, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Kelsey Hayden, Director of Parks and Recreation. And tonight I have the pleasure to be before you to present the proposed master plan for Mabel Claire Thomas Park for your consideration. I'd like to start off with a timeline or a little bit of background information. So as a reminder, Mabel Claire Thomas Park redevelopment project is a 2022 bond project that was approved by voters. And although the concept development started in 2023, years and years of public input were put into the concept development that ultimately became the master plan that you're seeing tonight. So some of those plans include a park vision plan that was created in 2021, a Texas A&M student project that was created in 2020, as well as the Eastgate neighborhood plan from 2011, amongst other public input engagement efforts. And so over the last year, we worked on that concept development, and then we went back to the public as a touch point earlier in September and in October, both with a public input meeting in September where we had 18 participants from the community. We presented to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board at their October meeting, and then we had an online survey that was posted from mid-September through early October where we had 574 responses. The public engagement from this survey is in front of you, and some high-level things to point out. Those things that were of most importance are the multi-purpose lawn for open play throughout the park, shaded seating, the arrival and entry point improvements, a restroom, and areas of active play. So we found that the touch point really did validate a lot of the public input that happened years in advance. So the proposed master plan is in front of you. This is the full park with the full master plan. Several of the amenities that are within the park are proposed to stay, and those areas are the multi-purpose lawn, the playground north of Francis, the fitness station that's north of Francis, as well as both the basketball and the tennis court. In addition to those areas, there are several other proposed amenities throughout the plan that I will walk you through in the next few slides. Excuse me. Circulation is a big part of the improvement in the master plan, both with trails and sidewalks throughout the park. And so in order to develop that, we really looked at the users and how they traverse the park. So in north of Francis, as you all know, there's a fitness loop that will be improved, but in addition to that, there's trails throughout the whole south of Francis portion of the park. And one of the main areas that we wanted to improve in the proposed master plan is the creation of arrival points, because you can get into Thomas Park almost anywhere. And so those arrival points, there will be a main entry that will be off of Gilchrist Avenue and Puryear, as well as many secondary entries throughout the park at Francis and Puryear, Bolton Avenue and Puryear, James Parkway and Brooks Avenue, and then James Parkway and Gilchrist. We'll first focus at the area north of Francis. And so at this area, the proposed master plan has many of the existing programs remaining that include the playground, the swing set, and the outdoor gym. Improvements would include adding additional trees to create a buffer around the existing playground area, as well as shade, adding areas for seating throughout, the enhancement of expanding the existing trail that people use as a fitness lap, so that would be improved, with the addition of trail markers. The multi-purpose lawns that are there now would remain. There is a soccer court on here. That's just to show how big of an area that is. It wouldn't actually be striped for soccer. It's just to show that open lawn space. And then we would also add low-intensity exercise stations throughout that trail to complement the existing fitness structure there, and shaded seating throughout. The next area that we'll zoom in on is in the central area south of Francis. This is a really active area of the proposed master plan, so it would include things like an active play area with spaces that would have things like swings, slides, and different elements for climbing. Not necessarily a traditional playground structure, but a really engaging space. It would have the play village, a discovery play area, and a habitat educational area. And here's a concept of what that might look like. The next area that we'll look at is the southernmost tip, closer to Kyle Avenue. And this area would really focus on nature exploration. So most of you know the drainage that runs through Thomas Park. This would really highlight that. Rather than it just being drainage through the park, we would include habitat and educational opportunities, biofiltration and riparian zones to really filter the water. And maybe it has different, as you can see the pictures there, stepping stones through it, so it really becomes an experience versus just the drainage throughout the park. That would also be bordered by 2 additional activity lawn spaces. And here's a concept of what that would look like. The park would also have additional historical and memorial elements throughout to really celebrate the namesake of the park, Mabel Claire Thomas, and all that she did for the community and childhood literacy. Those elements are not pinpoint exactly where they would go in the proposed master plan, but they would be incorporated. And these are some pictures of what those signs might look like throughout the park. The proposed master plan would also call for a pavilion and a restroom facility. You can see the structures there. The idea would be to design them so that they fit in with the makeup of the neighborhood. The proposed pavilion there is really open air, inviting, and has an open concept. The restroom is proposed to have 3 different stalls, gender neutral, with additional shading on the side. This is another picture of the overall master plan. And a high-level cost estimate of what the full build-out of this proposed master plan would be. This cost estimate is just a construction cost, and so it does not include contingency for the project, nor does it include a full design cost. The full design cost could potentially be 12 to 15% of the overall construction price, and contingency on a project of this size would be about 10%. Tonight we are seeking approval of the proposed master plan. And if approved, the next step would be for staff to bring back that construction contract. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Just in general, question 2, what's our overall amount from the bond issue for this park?
Yes, sir. The bond was $3 million. And then in addition to the bond package that passed, we do have the Mabel Claire Thomas improvement project that has a little over $2 million in it as well from 2019.
So some of this will not be built initially? It's
That's
phased
correct.
in over time?
That's correct. We could certainly look at phasing through the design process.
And that would come out of the design process to stay within budget.
Yes, sir.
The other question is, on a park like this with all this vegetation, do we have any idea? I guess the design part would come up with this. The operation and maintenance cost is a lot of maintenance in vegetation.
Certainly, that's a really good question. And so a lot of the drainage areas where you saw a lot of the improvements, we'd focus on natural and native plants, and so they are a lot lower maintenance, but it would certainly have an increase in our operational cost.
Yeah, so I assume that'll come out in the final discussion of what we can afford and what we can't afford at the time we get to the construction of phases. And I just want to clarify, the street projects for James and Purrier come first, is that correct? They were going to come first.
They will, and we're going to try to coordinate those efforts at the same time so that we can have the roadway construction done as well as the park. but they are first on the list, yes.
Okay, and now I'll turn to the council for other questions. Mr. Smith, we'll start with you.
I appreciate your question about the street improvements. I drove around out there last week, and the streets are in really dismal condition, and I think it might be helpful to include them in the master plan, just so that you can see that it's not going to be, we're not leaving that alone. But and I know that there's a separate funding source for the street improvements, and that all has to be taken into account. So I appreciate that question. What is the time frame on those street improvements? Do you know?
For the street improvements?
Yes.
I am not sure. I'd have to
And
defer to.
Ms. Kane can
Yes.
answer that. I think she presented discussion of this one. We're talking about Lincoln and Francis.
So we're coordinating with the Lincoln project. As you know, that was very much delayed due to the Atmos project and before that for COVID. So Lincoln's currently under construction. We have a little over, it had about a year and a half contract, and they've been going for a couple of months. So a little over a year still left on that one. And then our intention is to start James Puryear following that. Right now we are detouring onto James Puryear and in the same area. So we didn't want to detour two projects on top of each other because it would create a lot of confusion and a lot of traffic in those neighborhoods.
So the streets wouldn't be done it wouldn't even be started for a year and a half.
Probably so. That's
Yeah,
correct.
But the streets and drainage go together, that the whole area. I think that was the first phase because of the drainage issues, and the street's going to be constructed to deal with drainage as well as the drainage inside the park. So
Yeah, so we're coordinating that with the design team on that one because, like you said, the original project was the streets, and then there was a drainage project, which are those and the other parks improvements that Kelsey mentioned. And so we're coordinating now with the design of the park to make sure that we're not adding drainage work through the middle of it where we want to do park elements. So we're coordinating all of that to make sure it all goes together and works well.
does that help, Mr. Smith?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I have a question. Don't go too far.
A question on that subject?
Kind of.
Well,
You're saying that the design fees on this would be somewhere between 12 and 15% cost of construction? Is that?
Cost of the project.
That seems kind of on the high end. Can you help me understand why we're so far outside the norm?
Yeah, so we typically see around maybe 10 to 12% on just in projects in general. Certainly the smaller ones, it goes up a little bit more, and then of our larger ones, you see, less than 10%. And so that's just our estimate right now based on conversations with the design team. But we will bring the design contract back to y'all next, and y'all can see that and kind of where it falls out. But we expect it to be somewhere, the 10 to 15% range is pretty standard for us.
Okay. Thank you.
let me just continue with Mr. Wright. Do you have any questions? Mr. White?
Well, I just want to commend you and your staff. I've had the opportunity to serve on the Parks Board for the last 3 years. This is an extremely exciting project that we've undertaken. We want this to be probably one of our signature parks in the city, and I think Kelsey and her team has just done a great job of putting things together on this. So I commend you for doing this, and I'm super excited about it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. McElhenney? Any other questions?
Just one question on the waterway that runs through that. Are you seeing that being an active waterway or just detention?
It would be detention and drainage through the park. It would not be an active waterway.
I would be very interested in hearing anything we could do to speed this timeline up. This, like you gave us the timeline of all the tons of community involvement that has occurred with this. This is my home park. You could almost see my house on this map if you extended it about an inch. And it especially, I mean, there's no shade anywhere, especially on that north side. We love our park, and I would love to see this one move a little quicker than let's start it in a year and a half.
Mr. Yancey?
Thank you, Mayor Nichols. Ms. Kane, thanks for all you do for the city. I'm not sure who I should direct this at. Both of you, thanks for all you do. These courts, your budget's only $200,000. How are we getting away with that? I've seen much, or are we just refurbishing what's there? We're not going to tear it out and restart?
Correct. That's a really good point. The budget that you see for the court resurfacing is just resurfacing. So it'd be the existing slabs, and we would just take and strip and remove the existing surfacing and add new surfacing to both the basketball and tennis courts.
I was on one of those. There's some pretty major cracks in it. I mean, there's a way to shore that up, I guess.
There is. It wouldn't be a long-term fix, but you could get probably additional 5 to 7 years out of it. For the $200,000 mark, to completely tear them out would be about an additional $1.7 million. But we can level them out and then resurface them.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Nichols.
Mr. Schaefer, I know you're familiar with this park.
Yeah, I am.
Questions?
Yeah, just a couple of comments, really, Ms. Hayden. The first one is, as has already been mentioned, I think the public participation on this has really been excellent, and I know that the Parks Department does a really good job with that in general, and that's much appreciated. So I wouldn't question at all sort of what you've got here. It seems that you've asked for that and you've got what you need. One of the things that's just a comment, and I'm sure that the landscape architects will pay attention to this and probably already have, but three pieces on here are what was asked for, number one, which are sort of open play fields, right? And those are really important spaces, and I would agree they should be number one, but I know sometimes what happens, I guess there are really 4 or 5 on here, but the turf is a key issue there. And whether or not they're playable and enjoyable depends a lot on the turf. And so paying attention to turf that's enjoyable and interesting and fun to be on, while also paying attention to the water issues is going to be tricky, I think. And so I'm just making a comment to say, pay attention to that, because we have a lot of open play fields in our parks that get kind of bare and hard and aren't really as enjoyable to play on as some of them could be, I think. So that's my general comment, and that would be true too for what the mayor was saying a minute ago about other vegetation. We've been hearing a lot about water lately and the need to conserve it. Thanks.
I would say, though, and I agree with the time that it takes to build something as special as this, it does take time. But I do believe we need to make sure we got the sequencing between the streets and the park in a way so that fundamental issue of drainage is taken care of before we start putting improvements in there without having considered that. If there aren't any more questions from council at the moment, maybe we can take a minute and ask the individual, Ms. Diane Davis, who has indicated she'd like to speak on this topic. And Ms. Hayden, you can come back after that, and we'll have any further council discussion that's needed. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you guys too. Welcome. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for letting me speak on this again. As you know, and it's been reiterated, we've been doing this for years. I mean, this has started, I went back and looked at emails. I've got emails going back before COVID. So it is actually a wonderfully concept plan. My concern, and I sent that to you guys, is just on some of the details. And I'm not sure how we address that. But things like we wanted to make sure that there was lighting on the basketball courts, and we wanted to make sure that there was certain seating and things like that. So the plan, I mean, I'm sitting there going, this is awesome from where we've been and some of the things we saw, which were pretty crazy. I mean, like basically closing off Francis and putting over other kinds of things. But anyway, that's just my concern. I would like to basically see if there's some way that we can also, as part of this, just get some information on some of the seating and some of the shading that is, again, in more detail. And then, and again, things like basically the lighting on the basketball court. So you guys have got my list of concerns. I'm not going to go over it in detail. But other than that, it's a great plan. The staff has done a great job. I mean, and again, I wish that we could speed this up and maybe start construction sooner. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis. I know you've had a long commitment along with the entire neighborhood there, and I appreciate the engagement and support. I think some of those detailed things that you mentioned probably will come out when we actually do to get a design contract with the final designers that deal with the nature of the type of park benches and the lighting issues and so forth. So I hope that will be taken care of at that time. I think what we're being asked to consider is approval of this concept plan to allow Ms. Hayden and the staff to proceed with a design contract. So Is there any further questions or discussion anyone needs to have, or if not, I
I would love to make a motion.
will be happy for Ms. McLean to make a motion.
I would love to see this move forward to a design contract.
Okay, your motion is to approve this concept plan,
Second.
allowing staff, and second by Mr. Schaefer, who's had a long history with this park as well. Not that we all have it all with that. Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second to,
One point.
yes,
just to add.
you could please speak to your motion?
Would it be possible for us to forward Ms. Davis's list regarding seating and just for consideration in that plan? Because I know it's 98% what the neighborhood was expecting to see. The seating and shading and the lights were kind of the only things that,
I also received a copy, so we
Oh, you
did
did?
have a
Okay.
copy.
Just
Yeah,
making
that's
sure.
the copy we have on the dais with there.
I did not even see
Yeah,
it.
no, it's okay. That was a written comment that she was referring to, which had a lot of detail in it, and
But
you
thank-
did get a copy.
Thank you. This, I know, this has got to be the most talked about project in the history of the city, I'm pretty sure. And in the length of time, we moved into the neighborhood in 2019, and it was a hot topic then. And I know the pool was the focus at first, and then we moved on to this. And I am really happy where it came, where it landed. I think what came first, the chicken or the egg, getting the streets right or the park right. I know it's a civil engineering nightmare that is going to have to be teased through to get it to where we can start either. But I think we're all dreaming of picnics in the park, so anything we can do to expedite. But other than that, let's get going.
If this is the most talked about one, I guess the northeast trunk line would come in second. But you weren't here for that one, so. And Mr. Schaefer, you wish to speak to your second? Okay, the motion is to approve this concept plan and encourage the staff to move expeditiously to the design contract. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Hayden, and thank you and the staff and all the people involved in getting us this far.